The whole thing about St. Patrick is fascinating because maybe he didn't even exist.
This is Take Two.
Yeah, so then with every colony or like people that like took over the island, our language adapted according to that, besides culture, religion and all that kind of stuff. But
I'm going to have to visit.
You're going to have to visit it. It's a little bit different now. I kind of took this lesson. I stole it from an American guy that came on my podcast, Charlie. And he lives out in West Cork. And I spoke to him about like the US and stuff. And he said, I refuse to speak shit about my country in a country that's not my own. So he doesn't want to talk anything against the US unless he's on US soil.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And after that, I was like, you know what? I'm actually gonna take that from you. Like, I will not even criticize Malta and stuff, but like the only time that I think I might talk shit about it or like speak about its flaws is when I'm there. Because wouldn't it be a little bit cowardly if I'm over here?
That's interesting you said about the American. He won't talk bad about America when he's not on American soil. I think the Irish fall in love with Ireland more. Like even especially people that have emigrated in their lifetime, Irish people have left the soil. They become so enamored with Ireland, but also the people of Irish genetics. You know, they just love they have this romantic view of Ireland, you know. And I think I lived in Los Angeles for a year, and that, like, when I returned, I went back to Kerry and went back to a place called Connor Pass in West Kerry, you know, and after just being away for 12 months, I was like, oh my God, this place, even though I saw it like 150 million times, like, you know, but yeah, there is something to that. And I think I might take his advice as well in future, because maybe I was talking bad about Ireland when I was in LA, you know, like, I'm trying to think now.
In fairness, you never, I think probably Catholic societies in general, like we talk a lot about like notions and all that kind of stuff, and especially people that are critiquing the idea of notions, for instance, and all that. But then you're also heavily critiquing yourself. You're heavily critiquing your own country. And I do think that comes from the culture of critique in general. So I bring it up a lot, but I know that people know that I'm not talking about the religion itself, but the way the church had a massive influence in or on the country, where it's like, you're not good enough. You're not, like, you're born a sinner, you're not good enough. And that, I do think, transpired into different aspects of life, where my country is not good enough. This is not good enough. And I think, like, even right now, you know, the whole political situation with Ireland is full and all that kind of stuff. I do think that people do tend to forget how lucky we are that we're here. As in, even the way they speak about undocumented refugees, no, send those away. You don't know the journey that they went on. You don't know whether or not their paper got, like, lost at sea or ripped off of them. And there's something that I do think Europeans in general do need to be a little bit mindful of when it comes to that. Like, we're so fucking lucky, man. We're so lucky. Yes, could it be better? Yes. Everywhere could be better. Probably you went to Los Angeles as well, expecting something, and then seeing the reality of it, of, Jesus Christ, this is the fucking city of broken dreams and desperation.
With literally tens of thousands of people on the street.
On the street.
And people from America used to actually travel to Los Angeles that were homeless, or either they were running away from their houses or running away from bad situations, or traveling to Los Angeles as a homeless person because it was the best place to be as a homeless person.
Stop.
And I used to talk because I took the bus over there, because I could have stayed there and I could have got a car and stuff, but I wasn't sure. I wasn't ready to make that investment. So I was taking the bus a lot. And probably the most fascinating discussions I had were with homeless people, because I was waiting, because I was working in a restaurant, and it was like late nights, coming out, waiting for the bus, maybe 40 minutes waiting for a bus. So I was talking to a bunch, and of course I was interesting to them because I was this Irish guy that was just randomly in the middle of Los Angeles, like, you know. So yeah, it was fascinating to hear. There was one guy I was speaking to, and he was homeless his whole life, like pretty much his whole life. That's what he was saying to me. Like he was like in his 50s, 40s, 50s. When I say his whole life, pretty much from a teenager.
Yeah.
And he was basically, it was kind of like it was almost like the only life that he knew at that point.
Mm.
And he was explaining to me like his daily life and stuff. It was just crazy, you know. So yeah, I mean, as I said, coming back to Ireland I realized how beautiful the place is and how much I loved Ireland, you know. In terms of all the stuff that's going on nowadays, in terms of what we have and what other people don't have that they're coming here. I mean, the thing is, I'm going to go to the Epic Immigration Museum. I haven't gone there yet. And like, I'm finding it fascinating now, the amount of Irish people that left these shores, and economic migrants, and also because of, you know, other situations, war of attritions and famines and things like that. And how we had to build our lives in other places. And I read, it was a book actually, I didn't read it, but I was just scanned it. It's called The Irish Empire. There was a TV series made about it.
Okay.
I must watch it. It was made in 1999. Where it's all about how the Irish went to these places, namely kind of, you know, America, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, England, whatever. There's more places though, but they're the main ones. And how they kind of made a mark on the society there, you know what I mean? So I would imagine at that time, there was a lot of people that were not so much the natives, but the people that were there for generations that did not want the Irish there.
Yeah.
That did not want these people coming in. You know, there was that kind of pushback in England. There was complete racism against the Irish.
Yes.
That's a fact. You know, my mom was born in England. She's Irish blood. I love the English and I like England. So whenever I say anything like that, it's nothing to do with the people. It was just the time that it was.
Yeah,
a lot of it was aristocracy and monarchy stuff.
Yeah,
like, you know.
yeah. It
So,
was. I
yeah.
think it was also, I don't know, this is coming from a Maltese person, that the England also had taken over Malta. I think the main difference is the proximity of you guys. Like,
Yeah.
they got Scotland, they got Wales,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, we're gonna take this one. With Malta, it was a completely different story. There was a protest to have them out and stuff, but we did not experience what you guys did. But that also came with distance. That's one thing. Very different climate and stuff. No, let's be on their good books. Like, Malta's part of the Commonwealth. Let's be on their good books. Holiday.
Is it
Really
still
good
part of the
holiday.
Commonwealth?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was only like, my dad was born in 1964, and he remembers when the English flag went down and the Maltese flag went up. I
Okay.
really hope I'm not like butchering this, because I'm really bad with this, but that's the story he said. So it would be fairly recent with Republic and with independence. But yeah, no, like, in fairness, it's a completely different story to you guys. I think it was just like, no, we need them, because like, we need Ireland, because that means that our power would be greater.
Well, it was 1,000 years of. It started like in the 1170s, and like, thing about Ireland, it's always been kind of. We have mythological invasions as well as historical invasions. So it's always been almost coveted by other peoples. Like, I'm talking about these invasions now. I'm not talking about anybody that's happened, you know, migrants today or anything like that. I'm talking about, you know, the actual planned invasions of the place, or at least coming upon the place like the Vikings did and saying, okay, we're going to come back here, like, we're going to make a plan and come back, because it's a beautiful place. But not only that, it's arable land, you know. There was much resources, especially back then. There was like, Ireland was a completely different place 1,000 years ago. Up to, well, 1500 years ago, it would have been just full of woodland. Like, I mean, 70-80%.
Is it true that it then kind of changed from woodland to everything has to go to Dublin, so that?
Well, the woodland would have been chopped down over a period of time. Like, I mean, as the kingdoms expanded in on the land of Ireland, they would have been just chopping down the woodlands just to keep people alive and stuff like that, and buildings and stuff. And then, once the settlement started, especially when the Vikings came, they kind of took over the monastery settlements of the cities, and then they would have brought in the whole commerce side of it with the coinage, because they were the first to make the coins in Ireland, Citric Silkbeard in Dublin. So they kind of brought in a new advancement of like what a city actually is, or a town, like, you know, and then the Normans came in, and then it was all a different Ireland, because the Ireland before that was kind of was around monasteries, you know, and then before that it was just around clans, you know, and you know, it was around like ring forts and things like that. So there's this notion that Ireland was always like fighting against each other and stuff like that, as if the rest of the world wasn't fighting against each other, like. But there was this aspect of clan versus clan, you know. This is our clan, this is our part of Ireland. We'll trade, we'll barter with you, but don't mess with us and we won't mess with you. But then people would mess with each other.
There was always someone that like, goes like, let's see about that.
Yeah. And then they say, okay, I'm going to take your land now, and then we're going to expand for a little bit, and then they might win it back, you know. Like
I think it's just a human thing. In fairness, whatever it may be.
Look at companies today. Like companies are basically doing the same thing.
It's the same thing. It's about money. Like sometimes I curse the day that coins were like introduced, but then it's also like, I know there was always trade.
There was cows before that in Ireland.
Exactly, cows.
Literally
I
cows.
heard of salt as well being a thing too.
It would have been,
So it was always there. Before we go into the fun stories and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Could you explain the difference between history and myth, please?
Oh my God.
Because I do think that a lot of people go like myth, fairy, history, real life.
There's a common misconception about myth, that myth means a lie.
Yeah.
That's kind of a modern kind of fallacy, I guess, if that's the correct word to use. But and I think without going into, I'll keep it simple at first, because I could go into a big tangent about that, the reason why it became that definition, you know, right, and the way at least people think about it. But the difference between history is history is recorded as such. Now there is oral history, but there is recorded history, and that's what. And then there's archaeology. There's a whole science around history, where historians study all the sciences within history, archaeology, you know, geology. Then you have your recorded, your annals of Ireland, you know, you have your books, you have whatever, and then they come to a consensus about what actually happened in terms of history. Mythology is really our oral history. In my belief, it's our oral history, but it has been kind of turned into a fantasy over time, and a lot of it could be down to the Christian monks as well. Because at that time, the way the clans worked, I'm talking about Ireland now, in terms of, like, you know, the rest of the world may have a different way of looking at it. But the clans would have passed down their history, you know, through stories, through the Shanachquis, which is Gaelic for storytellers. The Netflix of that time was sitting around the fire at night time, like, you know, and the File, or who was the poet, or the Shanachquis, they were kind of the same thing. There might be a little bit of a difference, actually. Maybe the Shanachquis more modern form of a File, which was a poet, and they come in and they literally recite history in a form of a poem. So they would be, and the reason why they did that was it was easier to remember, and also it was entertaining, and it would tell the story. So in my belief, from my research, that mythology was that, but it turned into this fantasy because it was written down by the Christian monks. The mythology, the oral history was written down, and it was turned into a kind of a fantasy that it wasn't history. They kind of added in elements to it, like, and it's not to be believed. There may be kernels of truth in it, but it's not to be believed.
Okay.
But it was history at one point. Yes.
And then it slowly became a fairy tale.
Exactly. Okay. They kind of added to it over time. Yeah. There was this theory in alternative histories that it was actually an attack on real history to basically change the narrative to suit that, I suppose, the Christian takeover, and also as well, it's just easier. It's probably a little bit easier to have a thing like a big fantasy than to actually know what really happened. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so true though. And I think...
Am I making sense there?
You are making sense.
Yeah.
And I think, weirdly enough, the one thing that I kind of thought of there is, aren't we seeing a sort of play in the way the media works and news articles work as well?
Yes.
And I think it kind of circles back to the way we started this conversation, where it's just the same shit.
Yes.
Just using the tools of the time. And that's so bloody interesting.
Well, you know,
It's
like
shit, but
as well, I was talking to a friend of mine who actually did another podcast with me, and we were talking about this, like J.R. Tolkien and is it J.R. Martin? Is it? Or no? What's Martin's name? The guy at Game of Thrones. Martin, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
The guy that wrote Game of Thrones.
Yes, Martin.
This is almost like a mythologizing of the mythology that already existed. So it's almost like Plato's cave. You're just going deeper and deeper into Plato's cave. You know, that it's like the shadows on the wall. Now we're actually watching the shadows of the people watching the shadows on the wall. Because what I found interesting is that sometimes when you talk to people about TV series, Game of Thrones and Vikings, they almost can't separate them. Like, oh, I preferred Vikings. Oh, I preferred Game of Thrones. But I'm like, they're two different. That's history. Well, Vikings is kind of fantasy as well, but it is of historical characters.
Okay.
And Game of Thrones is of mythological characters that was created by an author. You know what I mean? So I find it fascinating that people can't even differentiate the difference between the two shows.
Yeah.
You know, Vikings was on the History Channel and Game of Thrones is on HBO, like, you know what I mean?
Weird question.
Yeah.
Do you think that dragons are real or were real?
Not in Ireland.
No, in the world.
I do have a belief. No, I don't know. I mean, look,
I think they are, or they were.
Potentially.
Just without the fire breathing shot.
Yes, like, I'll tell you what my belief system is. Okay, so like, I believe in a supernatural realm.
Okay.
That's what I believe in.
Yeah.
I do believe there's a supernatural realm.
Explain.
For instance, for example, I felt something in the crypt today in Christchurch. That's going to come. I know people will judge that, but I literally couldn't care less. I
Like
couldn't.
Paranormal stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely a presence down there. No, I definitely don't see ghosts. I don't have that eye. But I feel it. And now it's not often, but when I went down there, I was like, whoa.
Like you feel an energy.
Yeah, there was like a dark energy down there.
Yeah.
And I felt uncomfortable. So for me, like our folklore and our mythology, because folk tales can be a little bit different as well to mythology. Folk tales are kind of like almost like, they're not necessarily the oral history, but they're kind of like these urban legends of history. Do you get me? So you know the way we have our urban legends in modern day.
Yeah.
Folk tales are almost like the urban legends of old.
Okay.
Right, when rural legends, let's say, you know, kind of. I think that's kind of a good way of explaining it. So in our folk tales and mythology, we have a thing called the She, which is the fairies. But it's not the Disney type fairies.
Yeah, can you explain those?
Yeah. So for instance, you spell fairies in English is Fairy, but our fairies is Fairies.
Yeah.
Fairies. And I was a tour guide for Celtic Consciousness in West Kerry, and there was some great people working on that. And they were from Galway. We were speaking before. I don't even know if we were being recorded then, but there was some Galway Shanachquis there, like, and folklorists and people with PhDs and stuff like this, like, you know, like I'm talking serious people, and they would have really emphasized the fact that people they have a really wrong impression of fairies. They think that fairies are like, you know, these Tinkerbells and, you know, make a wish or whatever, but a fairy could appear as a person. So for me, what I took from it was that it could be it's a supernatural thing, and it can work through people. You know. Now they were kind of saying it could actually be a person that is the fairy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now for me, I feel differently about it, but that's the way they described it.
Like a different version of a ghost sort.
Yeah, or it literally is. It can come as a person.
Yeah.
And for some meaning or message or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
In fairness, I do kind of. I am under the belief that we are not it. Like, we are not the be all and end all. There has to be more. Just as much as if you were to go down in the ocean, there's so much going on, you know? And like, it's everywhere. Even if I were to put a microscope on my skin right now, like, there's a universe happening here.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's like the cool thing about it. So I do think I had one friend talk about a theory where they believe that the way the world works is there's kind of like a quantum energy happening where there's more happening around us.
That's it.
But we can't see it, but it's happening.
That's exactly my belief system. There's a supernatural realm in this realm. And that's what I felt today. And I also felt it at the Hill of Tara as well, and I felt this real urge where it was kind of almost like people aren't respecting this site. I kind of just had this instinct. It was like a kind of really uncomfortable feeling because it's a sacred place. Like,
Yes.
it's a sacred place. No matter where I go in the world, if the people tell me this is a sacred place and I don't believe in any of the religions or myth or anything, I don't know anything about it, I'll still respect the site. But people weren't respecting this place. They were kicking ball off the top of a mound that was 4,000 years old. And it was, but anyway, so it's like, for me, the supernatural realm is the realm. And I think there's something to Ireland in essence. And I think that's why people are attracted to it. I think there's something spiritual going on in Ireland. And I think, because Ireland, if you think about it, the grand scale of things, in terms of people say it's a beautiful country and stuff, and it is. But do you ever see New Zealand?
Yeah.
New Zealand is like, has mountains about 4 or 5 times.
Yes.
It's more like epic. But there's something about Ireland, and I think people are trying to say it's a beautiful place, it's wonderful, but I think it's something more than that. It's a kind of a spiritual, supernatural thing that they're drawn to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me, in fairness. I think it's also just, weirdly enough, so my blood would be Irish and Scottish.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
And the way it worked is, a Scottish man and an Irish woman couldn't get married, so they moved to Malta. And the weirdest thing happened so my dad would have been raised for 2 years or 3 years in Ireland on the West Coast, so 2 years in Galway, 1 in Sligo. Long story short, I then sat down with his babysitter that's now in her 60s. And the first thing she told me was, strange, have you ever heard of souls returning to where they belong?
Yeah.
I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, there's this cycle that happens where it's like kind of time for the blood to come back to like where it started out. And that gave me fucking goosebumps. Also, like, Galway accent, we're eating chowder, there's Guinness on the table, there was a whole vibe to it. But I was,
and you're getting the Irish accent.
and
Like,
everything.
I think there's something to that as well. The fact that you have the Irish blood in you, and you have this. It's like an Irish brogue, as the Americans call it.
Okay.
And I think there's something to it.
There's something to it, but I think there's something to like everything and people either being curious or entertaining. That's the beauty of like even this podcast. I'm bringing on people that are curious and publicly curious about a certain thing. And that comes in different shapes, and the media or anything like this doesn't need to be involved in it, right?
Yes.
But it's like, write your books, go and book that fucking trip. Like, entertain, let your mind be free for a second, or even go on that tour.
Yeah.
And it's for those goosebump moments, for those like feeling moments, or where then you just start that Google rabbit hole and all that kind of stuff.
I love what you're
So
saying
good.
there, actually, because it's kind of something where I've been thinking about it a lot lately, about freedom, like you're talking, just in the last couple of sentences, I'm getting this sense like that, your freedom is very important to you. Like,
Yes,
go book that, go do, find meaning, find a purpose, go do something with your life. And I think there's something really wrong in society now. And I think that's another thing as well, talking about Ireland as a spiritual place and stuff. I think the more you can kind of go into these, feelings and the freer you are in yourself and the free you are in this world, it's just going to, automatically the place becomes more magical. That's the way people used to live. Yeah. And I know we have to settle down, we have to build our houses, we have to do these things. I know, but I think people are they're so imprisoned by this society, and it's only a zeitgeist. It's only something that's fleeting. I understand we have to have a place to stay. We have to have a place to stay warm. We have to eat, we have to procreate, we have to make families and stuff like that. We have to do all these things, but people are so imprisoned by it, and there's no mystique or magic anymore, like, you know what I mean? And that's what I'm all about now, like, because I think that's why I'm getting so enamored by Irish history, mythology, and the supernatural, and my own place in it, because it's like, I want to experience it, like, I really want to live it, and maybe even travel to all the diaspora, and meet others,
Yes. And besides all of that being important, it's also just sharing it so that the next generations can keep telling these stories.
Absolutely.
And it's that form of documentation. So growing up, for instance, I wasn't raised on the idea of podcasts or stuff like that, but I was weirdly inspired by people having their autobiographies or just conversations being documented and all that kind of stuff. And this is it for me,
Yeah, it's
for
wonderful.
history.
It's wonderful.
Exactly. But that's it for you too. And the fact that you're like literally, like you're getting history, right? You're getting Irish mythology, and you're containing it in the format that is working right now is, not to be fucking dramatic, but it is like a documented moment. It's going to stay there forever.
Yeah.
And that's so fucking cool.
And it's relatable.
Yeah.
Because I think what happens with history, because I have some education in civil engineering and stuff, but I'm not educated, you know, in the sense I'm not a historian, but I'm self-educated. I've read dozens of books on specifically on Irish history and mythology. But the most important thing is that I feel why people are drawn to it at this particular moment, because people don't really like history, because it's relatable. When somebody is experiencing it and has passion and is not too, you know, I like to be very accurate as much as I can, but it's not about the facts and figures. It's about the feeling. It's about the mystery. You know what I mean? So I think that's why people are responding to it, you know, and it's wonderful. I love it.
And that's why people enjoy watching TV series more than that, you know, because it's easier for them to consume. It's educational and it's entertaining. And that's like the key to it. If so many people that have PhDs, if they were to sit down and have a crash course in content creation, our brains would be significantly juicier right now. But that's a story for a different day. So in saying that, this is going to be a slightly different podcast besides the very long intro, because I just want to sit down and hear of all these stories. Like imagine there's a fire between us or something like that.
Okay.
And the first thing that I want to kind of go on is the Battle of Clontarf and Brian Ború. Ború. There you go. Could you tell me a little bit about him, please, and just give me the whole spiel? Well,
I met a wonderful lady today in Dublin, and she said to me it was the Battle for Dublin. So she put me right. It's known as the Battle of Clontarf, but she said it's a battle for Dublin. And she was actually probably right in essence, because politically that's what it was. But it took place in Clontarf, for sure. So basically, Brian Ború was a Munster man, and he was born into at that time an aristocratic family, for sure, the Dalcassians, and they would have been based in around County Clare, so in a place called Killaloe. I'm actually going there in about 2 or 3 weeks. I'm going to be doing loads of stuff. I'm going to be doing like lives and stories and stuff. I'm staying in Killaloe, and he basically would have experienced as a young child the murder of his kin, you know, by the Vikings. When I say Vikings, we're talking specifically at that time it would have been the Norwegians, and they would have been coming in.
Would they be the stereotypical Vikings, like the ones with the ginger hair and the beards, like the way we see them in pictures now?
Yes,
like with an accent.
Yeah, for sure. The axe, yeah.
Cool
They were savages at times. They were amazing people as well. I have actually a lot of respect for Vikings. Like when I say Vikings, we're talking about the actual culture of the Norwegians, the Danish, and the Swedish. It was mainly the Norwegians and some of the Danish that came to Ireland. They would have settled here, but in the beginning they were very much about slaughtering and plundering and raping, seriously, and pillaging. But they would have came with a bit of a plan as well to settle here because of the arable land, because of the resources, as I mentioned already. You know, so to make a long story short, Brian would have experienced this. He was a part of a family that was an important family, but they weren't that important because they weren't the king. He wasn't the father wasn't the king of Munster. There was another family. I'm on the spot. Anyway, another family was the king of Munster at that time. So what happened was he would have experienced a lot of this, and he would have kind of taken inspiration from the Fianna, which was a mythological crowd, the Fionnmacúil and the Fianna, and rebelled against his own family at one point because they weren't taking it very seriously about the Vikings.
So his family before they were murdered?
This was so right after. I think it was his mother. His father was killed in battle, and I think his mother was killed by a Viking as well.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So maybe that could be added in for dramatic
Okay.
effect.
Okay.
But definitely the father died in battle. So his older brother would have taken over the kingship of the clan.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it would have been king of Thomond area. So anyway, they went on. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit. It turned out, right, that his older brother, who would have actually won the kingship of Munster at a certain point later in time, his brother was killed, and Brian took over the kingship of Munster. Because if I'll be here all night telling the whole story.
I'm going to keep asking questions.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a child. Like.
Yeah, no worries. And so and this is what I love about him, because it's just amazing. Immediately when he became king, and it was called Moo at the time. I love the names. And he was called Brian Ború. It was like of the cattle. It was something of the cattle, because it was all to do with cattle. They were like big cattle lords at the time, because there was no coins. And he went. There was a guy called Ivar of Limerick, who was a Norwegian Viking. Limerick is a Viking city, and he was the perpetrator in the killing of Mahan, his older brother. They tricked him, and Brian warned him not to go to this treaty. And he went, and they tricked him, and it was one of the other Gaelic families, and Ivar of Limerick were involved in it. And then once Brian took over the kingship of Munster, he just went on a crusade, and he went straight down to Limerick, and he annihilated the whole lot of them on Scattery Island, which is on the estuary of River Shannon. And he went on to win numerous battles, and he basically went on a crusade for the next. He was 36, 37 at the time. And he kept going until he won the High Kingship of Ireland. And he basically overturned 600 years of O'Neill dynasty, which was the Northern O'Neills, that they had the actual monopoly on the High Kingship of Ireland, which was a sacramental kingship from the Hill of Tara. Mm. And that would have been like the ceremonial High King of Ireland. And this thing was going on. Now, their kingship was going on for about 600 years, but the High Kingship thing has been going on for thousands of years. This is not to be frowned upon. It was it was a really important thing, hugely important. But Brian had different ideas. The 600 years was just really bringing up, as I said, ceremonial high kings. They weren't real kings with real power, in the sense that they didn't actually control the whole island. It was more of a ceremonial sacred
presidents nowadays.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Like an Irish president. Exactly.
We love Michael D, but
no power.
But
he's the ceremony. He's coming to do all the ceremonial stuff, and we like him.
Yeah.
But Brian came in and he said, "Listen, we're changing this presidency. We're changing Michael D, and I am now. Forget Taoiseach. Forget all these people. I'm the one. I'm going to change this." And
because they were shit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. And now there's historians that say he overturned the dynasty, he overturned this, overturned that, but there was loads of infighting going on. There was always skirmishes and crap. And at this point, after 40 years of defeating the Vikings over and over again and basically subduing them, he actually incorporated them into his plans and used their naval fleets. He actually was the first High King to actually do a naval expedition around Ireland using the Viking technology. He was an amazing person. And so when he became High King of Ireland in 1002, I think it was, AD, there was apparently about 10 years of peace. Maybe, that's what they say. And he went all over Ireland and he subdued all the kings. He was the only one to ever do it. They all bowed to him.
Jesus.
And he would have went to St. Patrick's Cathedral in Armagh and placed a load of gold up on the counter the altar. The counter. Give me a pint of Guinness there. And then they sat around and got drunk, and that was the end of that. But no, so it was like this is a part where it's kind of a negative, but I could see what he was doing. He was basically bringing church and state together. Now, it wasn't known as a state at the time or a nation, but he was the one, I believe, that had a vision of Ireland being a kind of an actual kingdom that can actually defend itself as one.
Hmm.
Because in my belief system, there was an older Celtic kingdom. Maybe I'll come on another day to talk about that. But there was an actual Celtic kingdom before that. But that's something that I won't talk about now. And I think that he took inspiration from that. He took inspiration from mythology and from the thousands of years of high kingship, almost like an Irish pope, except it was an actual king. You know, nothing to do with religion, but just a kind of a sacred, almost like the Fisher King myth, where once there's a king in place that has the kind of the good intentions of the land and the people,
The values.
yes, exactly, that the land almost prospers because of that. Like, it's not a toxic person.
No.
It's a toxic, or it's a positive force on the land. And I think that's what he had in mind. And unfortunately, it was the Irish tragedy, almost like a Greek tragedy. He would have done a lot of work. He rebuilt a lot of churches, and he built up the nation as much as he could. And you know, we have Cedric Siltbeard of Dublin, who was a Norse Gael Viking of Dublin, who he actually kept in Dublin. He defeated him numerous times, Brian did, but he said, listen, control Dublin, it's yours, but you're just submitting to me, but it's still your city. We'll work with you, like, you know. But he didn't want that. So because there was just, you know, men, you know, they want power, they want more.
Yes.
And Cedric was talking to a few of his mates from the Kingdom of the Isles, and they said, listen, we'll come down and support you. We want more of Ireland, you know, we want a part of this nation, you know. We're sick of being out in the Kingdom of the Isles. So Sigurd and of Orkney and his brother Broder came as well. And
his brother Broder
and Sigurd.
Okay.
Sorry, they're different. They're Vikings that were coming down to meet with Cedric Siltbeard.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because it's kind of like what Brian did before in kicking people out, like it's but his intentions were good, most likely, obviously. I'm sure he had like an ego thing.
I of course, there's ambition with everybody, but I think as well, incorporating the Vikings later on in his life, I think there was a making peace with it, because he actually adopted a Viking into his family. There's actually some sort of plaque down in the Killaloo.
Okay.
It's something THOR. So he adopted. It was a huge thing to have foster kids back then.
Really?
A huge thing. Massive.
I did not know that.
Yeah, huge. It was a massive thing. And also taking hostages, but the hostages would be treated better than the actual people that were living there. It was just this crazy. I met with it.
I'm assuming it's for the bloodline, you know, and extending everything, like take my surname.
Yes. And I think there are alliances, almost like marrying each other, marrying into different families and stuff. So he would have been married to a lady called Gormla, who was, and I think this is the shocking thing about the Irish TV and film industry, how they haven't actually exploited some of these stories. And I think it's just really is because of a kind of a British Roman kind of American narrative that has to be supreme, and the Gaels will just have their little stories about banshees of Inish, but we won't talk about the actual high kings. And actually Gormla, who was the high queen 3 times.
Damn.
You know, she was amazing.
She was on top, yeah.
She was. And Brian Ború married her, like, you know, he was his third wife.
As he should.
Yeah.
Why the fuck not?
Cedric Siltbeard was her son. She was married like at 15, 16 to Olaf Curran, who was a king of Dublin, and they had Cedric Siltbeard, who became the great survivor, an amazing character, a Norse Gael.
I love the gossip from.
It's amazing.
Like,
so the Battle of Clontarf. I'm sorry, I'm going off on one now.
Fuck keeping up with the Kardashians. What the fuck is this?
This is it. The Battle of Clontarf. So the battle for Dublin, the Battle of Clontarf. This is factual.
Okay.
On one side, you had Brian Ború. Mm-hmm. You had his obviously his Gaelic accomplices colleagues, or, you know, alliances. Mael Shacknail, who was the defeated High King, who he took from, you know, he was the last O'Neill to have it, and he was on his side at that particular time. I think he may have kind of backed out at the final thing. They still won the battle, but I think he might have backed out. But anyway, the point is, he had his Gaels, he had some of his Vikings as well on his side. And inside the city walls of Dublin was Cedric Siltbeard, his ex-son-in-law, his ex-wife Gormla, who was Cedric's mother, his daughter Slánna, who he had married off to Citric while he was married to Gormla. This is Brian's daughter, Slánna, was inside the Dublin walls.
Wow.
And also fighting in the battle was Gormla's brother, who was Citric's uncle, obviously, was fighting in the battle. So you had like this real huge family feud going on in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, it was insane. It really was insane.
I'd love to ask Brian how he felt in that moment.
Unfortunately,
the betrayal.
Yeah, I mean, there's this. Apparently, it happened where the Vikings were being slaughtered at the end. It was a real bloodbath. Like the rivers ran red. Because they were cut off by the tide, and they were given orders, no mercy. So,
and this is over New Common Bridge.
Yeah, Ballybock Bridge kind of area. I reckon it could be Ballybock Bridge was where they were trying to get across, and they were being slaughtered. And apparently, Slánna said, Brian's daughter said to Citric, she said, apparently your Viking. Well, I don't know what she would have called them at the time, but apparently your folk have met their inheritance like that because they were being slaughtered in the water.
Oof.
While their ships were just there, see, they were cut off from their ships.
Yeah.
And then apparently Citrix turned around and hit her a slap, for saying that. But remember, that's Brian's daughter,
Yeah.
So she was delighted that they have lost, but she was married to Citric. And in that moment, or later on in the night, unfortunately, Brian met his death as well from a cruel twist of fate. Brodir, who was one of the, obviously, Citric's accomplices, he unfortunately met Brian in his tent. Brian was mourning the loss of his first son, who was going to take over, and his grandsons, and there was only one son survived, Donica, who was only probably about 21. And he was mourning the loss. So his whole crew, he just said, listen, I need time, go celebrate, it's okay.
So Brian won the thing.
Brian won.
But he died.
But he died. He got slaughtered that night. Yeah.
Fucking brother, the Brodir.
Brodir was an accomplice of Citric, yeah.
Yeah, and this is like Fairview Park.
This was around, it's either Brian Ború pub over in Drumcondra, where Brian was slaughtered, or it could be Kilmainham, where his sons are buried, his grandsons are buried.
I'm trying to think of Brian Ború pub. I went to one last week, but that's over in Philsborough next to the Bernard Shaw. Is that it?
Sorry, yes, that's it. Sorry, Phibsborough. Exactly, that's it.
Okay.
And I was shocked that
There you go.
I was talking to someone there that works there, and I was shocked to hear that there's not that many people that ask about it. I was like, oh my God, my heart's breaking.
It's right opposite the Bernard Shaw, which is so busy all the time. Yeah. And then you just see head against Brian Ború pub.
Brian Ború, yeah.
Shit.
So apparently that's the where his tent was. Now, Sean Duffy, who I met.
It's right by the river, in fairness. Yeah.
I was there a couple of days ago. I did a story on it. So Sean Duffy, I met him in Trinity College. He was an amazing historian and really nice guy. I attended a lecture with him as well. And he was so nice to meet me, and we talked and stuff. But he was very much making videos and doing this about Brian Ború. I'm not taking, if he ever watches this, I love the man. I genuinely do. But he was looking down on videos. He was very much into books. Writing
National
books,
Geographic and the History.
And I read a couple of his books, so I did read the books, but unfortunately, video is
it's key.
It's the new format.
Yeah. I hope you're enjoying my chat with Bertie. I'm just gonna interrupt it for a quick second and say, if you're enjoying it, please like it, please subscribe, please follow, please comment. I have no idea where the fuck I entered this conversation of mine, but if you're enjoying it, just let me know what you think. I'd appreciate it. Bye. Tell me about next story. I'm enjoying this.
Well, I'm glad.
On the topic of making films and TV series and stuff, you also believe that there should be something done about the Pirate Queen of Ireland, Grace O'Malley. So
absolutely,
let's talk about her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Okay.
Again, I don't understand why in this current, I'm not political at all. I'm looking at the mic.
Oh, don't worry.
I'm not political.
Don't worry. I talk shit over here all the time.
I'm not political. I'm non-religious. No, but I just want to say, that I'm genuinely couldn't care less about any political parties, whatever side people are defense. I'm not in any. I'm not going to be labelled at all by anybody. But observing the current narrative of which is amazing, positive feminism, which is an amazing thing. There is such thing as toxic masculinity, but there's probably toxic femininity as well.
Yes.
But there's this lovely stuff that happens around feminism, and it's been happening for quite some time now, and it's beautiful. And we see a lot of this going on in the current climate in terms of media and, you know, films and stuff.
Go on, Grace O'Malley, like, you fucking have her on a fucking plate.
And Gormla as well, who was like
yeah.
3
Although
times
she
high
was
queen.
a bit of a bitch to her dad.
But we love that kind of stuff. But Grace O'Malley was unbelievable. A person who never bowed to Queen Elizabeth I. I made a video about her, a couple of videos, TikToks and things like that. And they went up, they got a couple, I don't know, were they at around 100K or something at the time? Or I don't know, were they around 10,000 or 20,000, 30,000 views or something when Queen Elizabeth died? This was about a month or two after I released them. They skyrocketed.
Your social SEO went up.
They just skyrocketed. Everybody was on there again doing all the stuff. They were arguing with me about it, and I was like, I've talked about this like months ago.
She's in the 1600s, lads. Like, it's not your one. Like.
But she was
stupid people.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry, but
you know what I love about that, right? Is that when Queen Elizabeth died, right, the recent one. Go all the way back to Queen Elizabeth I, the very first Queen Elizabeth, and there was Grace O'Malley, who met her match, like Queen Elizabeth.
So what's her story? Like, let's talk about her a bit.
I know Brian Ború backwards, but I can tell you a little bit about Grace O'Malley. I'm certainly not an expert, but I'm definitely going to, you know, get more in depth. But she was an amazing, amazing person. Basically, she was involved in sea pirating. But the reality was the lines were blurred between pirating, privateers, and there's another one. Basically, back then there was grey areas.
What's a privateer?
A privateer is somebody that is basically, I think it's like someone that goes. It's kind of like almost like an old school capitalist.
Okay.
Like a really old school capitalist before capitalism was a thing. It was like somebody that went out like and just took business, you know. I can't really remember. It's like I think it's like a nice way of saying pirate, you know. It's like almost a legal version of a pirate.
Yeah.
It's because the way she
privateer wink.
Yeah, it was like she had her castles along the shore, and if you went in there into her shoreline, like if you were in view of her castles, Irish, Spanish, doesn't matter where you're from, you're paying a tax. Privateer. Yeah. And it was like she went with her, you know, obviously she didn't go every time, but she had her men going, and they had their papers, right, that they came up with themselves and said, pay the tax. And you had to pay it.
Wow.
So she was like...
where in Ireland?
This was in Mayo, County Mayo. And there's a beautiful statue of her in Mayo somewhere. Is it Ballina? Is it? Oh, I hope I'm not ruining it.
Don't worry, I'll pop it up.
Yeah, you can pop it up.
Yeah.
But she's beautiful, striking statue of her, like, you know. And but she was very much like, you know, there was definitely that kind of real streak in her as well for protection of her family, like real, you know, she went over to Elizabeth with like purpose, like, you know, I want to be looked after. Like if we're going to do business, I want you to make sure my family is good after I'm gone. Like,
what was the reason for her going over to Queen Lizzie?
Because there was this new kind of constable in town. Can't remember his name. Can't remember, but he was not constable, but it was like a governor. There was a new governor in town. So because you see, you have to remember. Britain, you see, the thing people don't understand about the whole battle with England and Great Britain and Ireland is that they got so far. It was over generations and generations. By this time, it was around 15, 16. Oh God, I can't remember exactly when.
Worry, you're fine.
Yeah, but I'm meant to be a history buff, you know. You know, it was around the 16th century, if I'm right, I think.
We can pull up our phones.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's grand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just pull out a phone from my crotch and on camera, like.
Do a bit of editing. But anyway, so basically they were edging in on O'Malley territory.
Okay.
The British were, and that's why she was having business, because she was a very established. They were part of the O'Malley clan. It wasn't just her. It was like a generational thing where they had this was their kingdom almost. Like this was their area, and Queen Elizabeth understood, and I guess maybe there was an intrigue there. Like, this woman is like,
Yeah, like
you know, she's
a boss ass bitch without
yeah,
the royalty.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like I'm impressed. She was probably impressed by her that she was running the business and probably a very, very male dominated
Yeah.
world and space.
And then there's
at the
that
time.
there's a kind of the folk tale of her bearing or bearing a child on a ship.
Okay.
While, you know, and it could very well have
Yeah.
happened because she spent most of her life with it. She lived on an island,
Mm.
you know. So, and I to go back to it, so she demanded a pension for the O'Malley family, for her and for the O'Malley family after. Like, so she went over, and Queen Elizabeth kind of wanted her to answer loads of questions, and she did diligently. So there was a few meetings between them, which
Okay.
is fascinating.
Yeah.
And she never bowed.
Mm.
She never bowed to her, which I find incredible.
And was that the reason why she passed away?
Hmm?
Was that the reason why she died, or no?
No, she lived a long
Okay,
enough
so
life.
they were on.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
were on good terms.
Bingham is the name of the
Okay.
governor. Governor Bingham.
To linger it over there for
He
you.
was a prick, a prick, basically.
I
And
was like, where the fuck
yeah,
is this going?
yeah,
Brink.
yeah. And you know, but like it's a fascinating time as well, because you had I'd say Hugh O'Neill or Hugh O'Donnell around that time as well, who were fascinating characters. So there was a lot of this power plays, a lot of stuff going on, and the Grace O'Malley story, and also a correct way to say her name was Granule. So it's Granuaile, Granule, I think, or Granule or whatever. So just to give it a little bit of correct me in the comments.
Irish spunk, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so her story didn't end in tragedy. What stands above her is the fact that she was A, running the show,
Yeah.
and B, stood to her guns. And
Yeah.
probably just the Irish aspect of she didn't bow down to the Brits.
There would have been I think she was the last of it, though, in terms of like what she didn't really last that much longer after her death, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
I think it was kind of like the west of Ireland just became a very desolate place. That kind of privateer, kind of, you know, pirating, all that kind of stuff kind of died out. I don't know anything about pirates or privateers after that.
Yeah.
I think with her it kind of died, like the dynasty. People can correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to remember, like, the British were really, they were keeping everything over on the east in terms of resources, and then just pushing the kind of desolation out to the west coast, like, you know what I mean? So yeah, but she was a fascinating character. A series, Irish Film Board, Irish Screen Ireland, please, like, what are you at?
Yeah.
What the hell?
They're on their high horse with Banshees right now.
Yeah. Another, you know, I like Colin Farrell. I really like Colin Farrell, and I like them, but I just find it difficult. Another kind of, like, you know, it's probably a wonderful story, and I really like MacDonagh. I really like them a lot, but it is like a kind of, like, you know, out in the west of Ireland, kind of, you know,
I agree.
like a little bit of, like,
I don't know, like, no, this is coming from a foreigner, right? So I don't have any say on this and stuff. I enjoyed the film, and I understand why people liked it. I was really happy that I went to watch it in cinema.
Yeah.
Because I know that if I were watching it at home on my television, I would have zoned out.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But it was kind of like, a lot of people have said that there is an aspect to it where it was a massive reflection on the Civil War. And if you watched it intently, you would have noticed, like, the effects of Irish people and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Maybe
think,
just make a movie about the actual war. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You know?
That's what I thought. Like, Fair Fox, but also, hello, there's the Troubles as well. Let's fucking watch a film about that, please. Let's talk more about that. There's so many aspects to Irish history and stuff, and it kind of turns on, like, the Irish versus the Irish again, which is like what we're circling back to every time. But I don't know. I thought it was a bit slow. It was a bit slow as well. At a point, I was then like, okay, yeah, it's about your legacy. You're throwing fucking fingers at stuff. Like, can we? Like, I don't know. I thought that there was going to be more to it. That's basically it. That's
and
all.
I really like them as people. I met.
Oh no, their chemistry was perfect.
Barry Keoghan one time in Wilman Lane, because I used to be an actor and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I did ADR work, and I remember him. He's a nice chap. And I know for a fact Colin Farrell's a nice guy because I know people that met him.
Mhm.
And they're all very nice. And I actually bumped into Martin McDonagh with another person. I won't say the other person was because he did a film with him. I just won't. It's not.
Yeah, don't.
But I did. And he's a striking person. Like, I mean,
Mm.
real presence. Like, and he's they're very intelligent guys. There's two of them. There's John Michael McDonagh as well. He made The Guard and he made Calvary, which I really enjoyed actually. Calvary was very good. But they're kind of, and it's not their fault because they're being elevated for it. But it's like, what is going on with the Irish TV and film industry when we have a perfect opportunity in the Vikings to show Gaelic history,
Oh yeah.
to show something of our culture that was elevated, that was almost royalty, at the time. Now, it's not about wanting to be like a royalty, like the monarchy or whatever, but there was a period of our time where we had this beautiful culture and kind of heritage, language and customs and traditions. It wasn't all about like, we're just so fascinated about the British and the fight against the British and the potatoes and the turf and it's like, and I'm really not making sense there in those last couple of words. What I'm saying is like, we're so caught up in the consequences of the British Empire's attack on us for the last couple of 100 years. We cannot get out of it. And I think the reason why that's the case is because it's very easy for that narrative, the Anglo narrative, the American narrative, basically the aristocrats of the world and the elites of the world, to say let them have their little battles that they won at the end. Let them have that. We won the war. They're speaking our language. They're pretty much living like us. But, let them have their little wins at the end,
Yeah.
Let them have their Michael Collins movie. Let them have their win the shakes the barley. Let them have that. But we're not going to talk about the High Kings. We're not going to include them in the Vikings, even though there was nearly 400 years of Viking history in Ireland, and we shot here in Ireland, and we've given them tens and tens and tens and tens of millions. But we're not going to include the Gaelic in it because why would we?
Yeah.
And like, the shocking thing is that these are meant to be Irish producers that are involved in this.
Maybe it's the investment though.
But it's coming from them. It's coming from Screen
Yeah.
Ireland. It's coming from the Irish.
Oh, I see.
It's Irish-Canadian production.
I think it's just a bunch of kissastery, I'll be honest with you. And I think, look, very simple example, and it has nothing to do with television, but a lot to do, was when the women's national team qualified for the World Cup.
Yeah.
They had to apologize for singing Up the Ra.
Yeah.
And there was a Sky fucking journalist going, don't you think that you need to be educated? And that was the fucking buffoonery. Like, when I saw that, I was like, what in the world is wrong with you? But she had to apologize on behalf of the team. Although they were just celebrating, and it's just a massive party song. Let's be honest.
Is it the manager that apologized?
No, it wasn't even. It wasn't the captain. It was a player.
Was the player Irish?
Yes.
I wouldn't have apologized.
The captain didn't apologize. Katie McCabe didn't apologize. I'll bring up who, but it was one of the players on behalf of the team.
I wouldn't have done it.
You wouldn't have done it, but in fairness, when you think about it, Bertie, the Sky journalist is talking to her, and on the fucking T-shirt is Sky. Money, investment, and that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, of course. They're pressured into it.
They're pressured into it. It's not like she probably wanted to. In fairness, though, I'm not going to speak on her behalf whatsoever. But it's just about the fact that even these producers are being directed. They're being pushed by bigger money.
Yeah, you're dead right, because as I said,
I'm not defending it.
No,
it's fucking stupid.
The elite class of the world, they've won.
Yes.
They've won. Like the English language dominates the world. They won. So if you're going to play in our field, you're going to play by our rules. So I get it, but there are people out there that have enough power. For instance, there's a lot of celebrities out there that have a lot of power. If they weren't so afraid of losing a little bit of prestige or position, You know, there's enough people out there that if they got together, they could put something together, you know, in terms of
100%.
Irish history and stuff. And look, I think about the Vikings thing, like I half an episode, would that be too much to ask? You know, so look, it's just a pet peeve of mine. I've gotten a lot of abuse actually online about that.
What do they say?
Basically, people don't understand what I'm saying, I don't think.
Why?
What I'm saying is that if the Irish taxpayer is paying for a majority of the production, if we're shooting this historical story on our land, when this includes our history, which is definitely up to about 400 years. Well, let's just be real, it's around 350 years of Viking history on the very soil you're shooting on. You have the actors there at your disposal that have the Irish accents. The Irish were paying for it because we're Irish taxpayers. And that my meaning is that why couldn't we just include a little bit of it? Ivar the Boneless was based in Dublin for much of his life. But they created a whole new story of him going to Roos. He never went to Roos. So what people are trying to say, but it's not an Irish show. But I'm like, I'm not saying it's an Irish show. I'm saying it's a Viking show, but we're shooting in Ireland. We're paying for it as Irish people. And we have a huge, extensive history with the Vikings. So why aren't we...
Yeah, like at the decision-making table going, listen, we're giving this to you. What are you going to give back
There's
to
a
us?
cultural test, apparently.
Yeah.
And I've looked this up, right?
Okay.
There's a cultural test. Apparently they're passing the cultural test. But you see, the cultural test, and it's very much an Irish thing. You know, we talked about this already, kind of, in a sense, where Michael D, it's almost just the ceremonial aspect of Ireland. It's almost like, oh, they're passing it because we're getting jobs, right? And we're showing the landscapes. And
I see.
That's it.
I see. So it's like, because you watch the Banshees of Inisherin, you're going to get more tourists down to Achill Island.
There you go.
I see.
Do you love Ireland? Do you love it? Do you enjoy it? And then do you know what I find fascinating about it? The crew that's not from Ireland and the cast that's not from Ireland, because I know people that worked on both Vikings and Vikings Valhalla. And actually I was a big fan of Vikings up to Ragnar when he died. I was a huge fan. I know loads of people that were in it, and I was so happy because I was involved in the production of a feature film, and there was one guy that had a role in it, and I said, get this guy, we got him on to our film and stuff like this, or whatever. So I'm a huge fan of it to a certain extent. But the people that weren't from Ireland that were working on it, they were like, oh my God, the Irish people are so nice, and the place is so nice. And it's like, and then like, I just imagine myself sitting in the corner, but any chance we can be involved in the story? Like, you know, like you're playing someone that was potentially on our soil. Like,
and they never get the accents right.
No. And then other people they'll say, oh, you're lucky because they've butchered everything. But I'm just like, I don't care, but still include us.
Yeah.
Because it's right. Imagine me going to America, making a show about American colonialists or whatever. I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but I go over and then the American taxpayer is paying for the show. And I go over and I say, okay, let's make a story about these colonialists that kind of go away and do something separately, but it's the Native Americans are included in this story. And I say, no, they're not included. But the Native Americans were like, but we were there. We were involved in this story. We were involved in this exploration. Yeah. And then I said, but no. But we're paying the money for it. Like, imagine that. It wouldn't happen.
But you know what it is? And it goes back to the very start of our chat, which is, we fear being trouble. We fear making other people uncomfortable. And it comes back to the concept of, you should be grateful that we're having this meeting with you. You should be grateful that we're considering Ireland. Don't be trouble. Don't make us uncomfortable. Don't make us leave. Or else you're going to lose this opportunity. So any producer or any director, whatever it may be, if we were to put ourselves in their shoes, we would understand that they probably have been dedicating their whole life for this one moment. And sometimes they go, if I push it too far, I will lose the gig. It's a big gig. And that is, I feel anyways, and I think it's just a concept that a lot of people have been talking about recently, which is the talent pool in, not Ireland, in Europe. even in the UK and all that kind of stuff. Shark's Den versus fucking, what's it called? Shark Tank. Or the Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. That's it. You're dealing with billionaires asking for a shit ton of money, like pitch to me and all that kind of stuff, versus Dragon's Den in the UK, the businesses are a lot smaller. This is no scrub daddy bullshit. It's the same thing when it comes to Europe, because now Brexit. You should be humble that we're bringing the big box.
Very interesting.
That's it. Is it right? No. And I completely agree with you. Ideally, someone coming to the land will go, okay, thank you so much for this. Like, this is what we're going to do. Like, we see the importance of the story, we're going to highlight it. Instead, they go similar to bringing on someone for free. You're going to get free exposure.
Yes.
That's it.
And I think the Catholic Church, the British aristocracy, the hundreds and hundreds of years of dehumanization, demoralization, and I'm nothing against people that practice Catholicism. Or
No.
I'm 100% on board with anybody that gets something out of religion. Just keep doing what you're doing. But this is just about the institution, the Roman kind of invasion and the British invasion, and just the hundreds and hundreds of years of the beatings that we would have gotten, and the just complete and utter, as I said, demoralization. And I think there's a certain element of, and I'm getting this from what you're saying, is that we're almost afraid to kind of
Yes.
You're going to view the landscapes. And
why do we get screwed over all the time, though?
Yeah.
Especially as independent anything or whatever. It's because they gatekeep a lot, When in reality, it could have been the case where if the producer just asked or spoke to the right people, they might have gotten the green light. We don't know. That conversation probably never happened out of fear of being uncomfortable. Look, I could be on my fucking woo-woo shit right now. Like,
no,
you know what I mean?
You're speaking sense.
But I do think that there is something within us where it's like there is that fear to ask for more. And I'm sure that there have been people that have been pitching this stuff. They're just going to the wrong people.
Yeah.
There's that as well.
There's a push. There's definitely a pushback at the very top as well. They don't really want to talk about the Gaelic Celtic kingdom.
Why make people feel uncomfortable though? Why let them sit in that until some fucking Quentin Tarantino wants to come around and do it? Then what will we do? We'll roll out the red carpet and kiss his shoes. Maybe even try to grab some toilet paper once he's done taking a dump. Like literally, that's it.
I'm just going to grab some water.
Yeah. But that's like a European thing.
Yeah.
Completely.
100%.
Weirdly enough, right? Because I plan on this coming out on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, wow.
And I wanted to say...
I'm intrigued.
Yeah. I think it's more just considering that St. Patrick's Day is just looked at as leprechaun, Ireland, all that
and
kind
Patrick
of stuff.
the Roman.
Kiss me, I'm Irish. I want to start off the St. Patrick story with a little bit of similarity between Malta and Ireland.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, you know how St. Patrick has the whole spiel with the snakes and stuff? We also have a holiday, it's celebrated completely differently, called St. Paul's Shipwreck. And the way it goes about is that St. Paul, who wasn't a saint at the time, there was a shipwreck outside of Malta. They came to shore, and he was telling a story around the fire and spreading the word of like Jesus and all that.
Is this the actual St. Paul?
The Jesus guy.
Okay.
The apostle, I believe.
Yeah.
He came to Malta, and similar to the Irish, sitting around the fire, spreading the word of God at the time. And out from the fire, this is the story, out from the fire came a snake and bit him. And he shook the snake off, and everyone around the fire was waiting for him to collapse. But he didn't. And from that day forward, there was never any venomous snakes on the island. That's our, thing.
Okay.
What about your guys?
Well, there was never snakes in Ireland. Real snakes.
Oh, shit.
No.
That's how we fucking started off. There was no snakes. No. I thought there was a fucking snake thing. Am I stupid?
No.
Was
the story is just an analogy, a kind of metaphor for the pagans.
Okay, carry on.
But
I'm
no,
excited.
but your story is cool though.
I look
don't-
stupid. Sorry.
No, you don't look stupid. You don't, because
No, that's fine.
that's what everybody. It is the story that
Okay,
he
so-
drove the snakes out of Ireland.
Okay, yeah.
But-
So I'm just a filthy foreigner. That's
No, I didn't know you're not a filthy
I'm
foreigner.
putting you
Far
on the
from
spot,
it.
Bertie.
No. No, there was never any snakes in Ireland.
But dragons did exist.
Yes, he drove the dragons out of Ireland. Yeah, but no, it was the story is really about basically converting the island to Christianity. So converting the serpent, you know, the way the serpent is, you know, a kind of a symbol for
Adam and Eve and the devil.
Yeah, well, and then there's the whole aspect of the serpent in the occult and, you know, alchemy and stuff like that. With that, it's kind of like the wise one, right?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So the serpent would not be looked at as evil in paganism.
Okay.
It would be looked at as the symbol of wisdom, you know. So the Patrick stuff is controversial. It really is. It really is, especially after all the research I've done.
Okay. This is take 2, so give us a new.
Yeah, like the thing is, and I think there's a lot of more people waking up to this that you know, my dad would always say this, and I used to wreck my head before, but like it was so true. Like he said, Patrick the Roman, he was a Roman, like, you know, so he was from Wales, but then there's some people that say he was from Scotland, but it was, let's just say Wales, because just keep it simple. But he was an aristocratic Welsh Roman, so that would have been the edge of the Roman Empire at the time. And the Romans never conquered Ireland. That's one thing you have to remember. But they did with the church, but they didn't with the army. But from my research, Palladius was the one that really set off Palladius was the one that came before Patrick. Palladius. But for some reason, his story is kind of brushed over. But from my research is that he did he laid the groundwork for Christianity. Now I'm doing a bit of work with another guy, and we're thinking about doing, you know, kind of like a documentary on ancient Ireland Uncovered and stuff like that. And he's really into the idea that Patrick actually came with an army, like, and started wiping out people and stuff like that. Like, now people were saying this to me around 6 months ago, and I was kind of in the TikTok, and I was like vehemently against it. I was like, how dare you talk about our saint, our patron saint?
Yeah.
St. Patrick, he never wiped out anybody, and it was the only island or country in the world that Christianity came in without bloodshed. You know, this is what we're told, right? You know, and then there was a whole thing about green martyrdom. The Christian monks, there was no bloodshed, there was no war, so they had green martyrdom instead of red martyrdom. Basically, they used to go out to have an aesthetic lifestyle, which was another way of, you know, in martyrdom, you're dying for your faith, right?
Yes.
You know what I mean? So they would have like been slowly suiciding themselves from the way they were living for the faith. So going out into Skellig Michael and going out into the wilderness and living with the...
Oh yeah, like the stories that you hear from those.
Bonkers, like. And then the Vikings came along and started attacking those places. It was just crazy. But anyway, sorry, I'm going off on tangents, but the whole thing about St. Patrick is it's fascinating because maybe he didn't even exist. That's what I'm reading. If he did exist, it was the beginning of the Christianization of Ireland. But the problem was, and that the Irish church was a lot different to what the Roman church was. And so the mission of St. Patrick, or whoever it was, Palladius or whatever, was to basically get the Irish church under control. But they couldn't. Some people believe that there was a type of church here already that was a sun-worshipping church, a kind of church of Iessa. And
What a pretty name.
yeah.
Okay,
It's
cool.
crazy. This is crazy stuff now. Like we're going down territories now where definitely judgment and
It's
definitely
okay. It's okay. I'm a filthy foreigner after all.
no,
okay.
stop saying that.
I'm
You're far from
joking.
filthy. You're the opposite of filthy.
Is
for God's
it? Thank
sake.
you. I sure.
Yeah.
No, carry on. That's so interesting, though. So
Yeah.
it's a sun worshipping church.
It was. Well, this, now, I'm just saying this is theories, and this
Theories.
is just from research, from books
Okay.
I'm reading.
So would this be technically mythology territory that's we're touching on, or
No, according to some people, it would be historical.
Wow,
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
So
Like,
it's-
yeah, like, and
so it's like a polarizing topic.
yeah, very
as well.
polarizing.
Okay.
And what is being suggested is that the Roman Church. Now, remember, you have the Roman Pope. You know,
Yes.
the Roman popes are coming into power, and Constantine would have, converted from paganism to Christianity, because it was like, this is the new. It's almost like the new thing. It's almost like a new political ideology, a new kind of like, format of controlling people or whatever, right? Now, I'm just trying to equate it to modern terms, right? And I'm not saying it's the same thing. So Constantine converted to Christianity, and then, he would have used that. I'm sure he was just basically, it was like changing labels. It's like changing from Burger King to McDonald's. Like, it was still selling burgers, but it was just different labels, right? So it was like using the pagan gods and kind of incorporating them into the new Christian church. And the Roman church, now think about it, right? He's an emperor, and the church, and remember what I said about Brian Ború, what he was trying to do earlier, what I was saying earlier on. There was this whole thing about having church and state, making it like almost like the kingship, the emperor is like a sacred being, right? Even though it's human. Look at the Pope today. It's like a sacred person that controls the institution. This was the whole thinking behind it, is to make it sacred so that they could be worshipped. So it's much like pharaohs of the past, right? So the idea of sending these Romans over to Ireland was to stop this church in Ireland, because the Romans never defeated us. They never went over to Ireland. They never defeated us. Because what I believe is that we actually had a system in place. We actually had defense. We had a defense, and also we had a very powerful church and very powerful people, and they did not want to mess with us. Why else would they not go there, like, So they sent, what I'm starting to think, now maybe I'm going in tangents here, what I'm starting to believe is that the whole idea behind the Christianization of the country was to weaken it. And it was like infiltration through spirituality. So the spirituality that existed there was powerful, and we had our druids, and we had our kings, and we had our clans, and we had our, just unbelievable power, right? This is why I'm so interested in this, and why it's not being explored. You see, it's not being explored for a reason. And so Patrick and Palladius were sent here to kind of start the infiltration process. And maybe there was bloodshed, maybe they brought armies, maybe they just killed them off one by one. But apparently the druids were all just wiped out, like, and they were the snakes. What? According to the Romans.
Wow.
Yeah, they were the magi, the Irish magi. They were the magicians of Ireland. So the druids would have been huge. They were the priests.
Because you said wisdom.
Yeah, they were the priests of Ireland.
Yes.
in the old ways. So you would have had your king, your queen. You would have had your file, which is the poet, and the Shanachui, right? So you have and they were all of equal importance.
Yes.
Within the clan. And then you had your druids, and a lot of them would have been roaming around with their basically with their powers, and also with they were in charge of language and law and stuff like that. Yeah. So they were kind of real powerful. And there's some people think that they used to travel around the world. And actually the Christian monks would have carried on a tradition of being centers of learning and traveling around.
Yeah, now we have Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck's sake. Carry on.
So that Patrick story, so that would have been the beginning of Christianity. And look, we have to acknowledge the fact that the Christian story is very powerful, and there's something beautiful about it too. There's no doubt about it. There is something powerful about Jesus Christ, like a lot of people would attest to having supernatural occurrences, and it's just saying that word. Those words can just ward off these things. And there's some people that think there's something about those words that is actually magical. Like
what words are you talking?
Jesus Christ.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like talk through Jesus, yeah.
There's some sort of power in the words. So there was that infiltration process that was happening. And it kind of took centuries.
Yeah.
It took centuries.
I know you mentioned that you said Patrick could have not even existed.
Maybe not. There's some theories.
So
yeah.
would it be what was his name again?
Palladius.
Palladius and someone else, or could Palladius potentially be Patrick?
Yes. So and people, they can comment all they want on this. I've actually sat down with a priest about this, Clarendon Street, and we've had big discussions. I also had a meeting with an author of a book called The Two Patricks.
Okay.
And this author said to me, maybe he didn't even exist.
Wow. Okay.
Even though he wrote a book about the two Patricks. And he was telling me all about Palladius, who came first and did all the work in terms of like the kind of laying the groundwork, the foundation. So you have to remember as well, the kings and the power structures of the time were always looking for different ways of, like
Their sticky
Constantine
fingers
did,
everywhere.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there was this element to it as well, where it was like, people would come in and they'd have this way about them. And back then it was a different world, no electricity, people coming in and they were just, I imagine the druids going around, they're just this beaming energy. Like, and maybe these people, these Romans coming in were just amazing strangers, like, but they came in with these stories of Christ and it just started infiltrating the consciousness, and it started changing things from the inside out.
100%. Like, we're still going through it now, where I do think that the religion or the Bible itself is a gorgeous work of
100%
scripture, and it helps so many people. But the culture in itself is you are lesser than. Give us the money.
There's so many versions of Christianity. It just tells you everything.
Exactly. Whose God is not even God, because it's not even a battle of religions, but it's like how. So, for instance, like back home, we've got like patron saints depending on the town and stuff. Now, in fairness, it's a completely different story with like feasts, but there would be talks of my Mary, like my Virgin Mary is better than yours. And it's like, how many versions of the Virgin Mary do we have? And that is under one religion. It's just the tale or the story of chapter 1 or chapter 2 in her life versus chapter 10. And it ends up becoming a battle, let alone the different variations of Christianity. Jehovah's Witness, for instance.
I've asked basic questions to different religious people, and I love these people because they're great people. And
they're so good.
There's nothing wrong with whatever way a person wants to live, once they don't impress on others.
You said supernatural at the start, but as you said, with the powers of the word Jesus and whatever, I do think that there is an element of, I heard Jesus talk to me. Someone else could say, that's my intuition.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Or it could be the higher power. Who the fuck knows? But at the end of the day, it's like, as long as you end up in the fucking taking the right decision and not screwing people over, that's the key thing.
Exactly.
And that's what a lot of people have a problem with the church. What's interesting though, this is what I want to ask you about St. Patrick's Day, considering that now I have a newfound story that I'm just hearing for the first time. So essentially, what is St. Patty's Day celebrating?
Can I be perfectly honest? It's never been my favorite day. I've always admired St. Patrick in the story, but it's never been my favorite day because it was always just a big piss up. Like,
it is a big piss up.
It's a big piss up.
Do you think, besides the excuse of drinking, of going out, some would say also celebrating Irish identity? Do Irish people know what they're celebrating for? Like, if I were to go on the road, I actually never went to a Paddy's Day parade, weirdly enough.
They're not great. Maybe if you go to New York, they're cool.
It intimidated, like a lot of drunk people around me intimidated me during daylight. So that's basically it. But anyways, it's are they just taught snakes out of Ireland?
Are you talking about this story for Irish people?
This story for Irish people. Like, let's get New York and whatever out of it. Like, St. Paddy's Day in Dublin. What are they celebrating?
So like in terms of when you're a child, you learn about the story, the actual generic story of Patrick coming, and the whole story is that he came as a slave in the beginning, because there was a lot of slave trading in those days. Everybody were slaves at that time. I know some people, like, you know, nowadays it's all about one or two races that were slaves, but actually we all were slaves at one particular point in history. That's a fact.
Yes.
The Irish were slaves, the Welsh, so we would take slaves, we would be slaves. The Vikings took slaves and we took their slaves. It was just the way the world worked. It was horrible. So he became a slave to the Celts, and he was a kind of a sheep herder. That was his job, right? So it wasn't necessarily like slavery being hugely terrible, because you could get nice little jobs out of it, which he was a sheep herder. And that sounds a bit weird. Slavery wasn't terrible, but you know what I'm saying? Like it was like what I'm saying. When we think of slavery, it's almost straight away the person is just on the ground dying.
Yes.
But Patrick was out in the fields with the sheep, like, and minding the sheep, and he would have developed a kind of a very much a consciousness for nature and God, I think. So he escaped and returned back to his aristocratic family in Wales, which was a Roman family, technically speaking. But he grew disillusioned with that lifestyle after being in Ireland, even though he was a slave. You know, so that's my point, is that even though he was a slave, it wasn't a terrible lifestyle. He was out in nature. He was experiencing a lot of the world. And he decided to return. He had a kind of a Christian, I don't know what, did he have some sort of conversion or something like that then? And he would have returned. He had a vision of returning to Ireland and Christianizing Ireland. And he came with no people, and he just basically started walking the land and started, I don't know how he did it. He must have rocked on up to one of the clans and said, lads, I'm here to talk to you about Christ. You know, so that's the story.
And where the fuck did the snakes come into this?
And then, so then he basically, this is the thing where I find this very difficult to understand, right? Okay. Because I went to the Hill of Tara, and I told you I had a weird experience there. And maybe we can talk about it. I don't know how much longer we have. I'm fine. I'm fine for time. I'm fine for time. Yeah, I'm fine for time. Don't worry.
He's fine for time, guys.
Yeah. So so I went to the Hill of Tara, and basically he was saying, okay, there across the way, this is the most sacred place in Ireland, the ceremonial heart of Ireland. This is where the high kings fought almost, let's just say 2,000 or 3,000 years, but could potentially up to 4,000 years of this place being like 142 kings inaugurated. So Patrick went over to another hill, and on a pagan festival day, I think it was, where they light a fire for the kingship or for that pagan festival, he went over and he lit a fire over on a hill just across the way, which was like flying in the face of this like tradition. And I was thinking to myself, how in God's name did he come out of that alive if he did that himself?
By himself, yeah. And
not only that, I got a book recently, and it's talking about the island of the setting sun, and it's talking about that hill is in line with the Hill of Tara and also Croagh Patrick, which is actually some sort of, not a ley line, but it's some sort of astronomical line. And he lit a fire while they were lighting the fire there. Basically, the High King might have been like, what the hell is going on over there? And in Croagh Patrick, where that became Patrick's Hill afterwards, that was another very sacred place as well. How did he have the knowledge of all that? That's the question, like.
Well, the power of God.
Yeah.
Come on, Bertie.
I don't know, like.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the thing is, the more I look into it, the more I think that there was a huge, massive thing going on at that time with a lot of people, and it's all been written out of history.
It's been written out. It's also just whoever, like, which humans lingered on, which families lingered on, that could keep telling all of these
stories. And it became his story. His story.
Rather than her story with Grace O'Malley. Let's talk about the Hill of Tara. So tell me what happened there. Now I'm curious.
Yeah, it's amazing. I would recommend anybody to go there anyway, by the way. Like, I really do think, like, if you're going to anywhere in Ireland, now you have to remember it's an archaeological wonder, like an unbelievable place, because when you go there, you just think, okay, it's a bunch of mounds, but it's what's underneath. Like, this place was just it's like huge structures that are going on there, like, or that were there, that's just been built upon or kind of settled upon in terms of the earth. So I went there and I said, okay, I'm going here. I'm going to experience it. I went into St. Patrick's Church that's there as well. Like, you know, of course they have to have St. Patrick's Church there.
Flipped him off.
Yeah. So I went in and I went into the documentary that was playing, and I watched documentary, beautiful documentary. OPW, big up to the OPW, like the Office of Public Works. They're amazing people. Paid my €5, and then a guy called Michael or something like that took me on the tour of one, just me and him. And I said, okay, we're going to go on the tour of the Hill of Tara. Now, I'm not religious anymore, but I believe I'm a spiritual person. Like, I have spiritual beliefs. I still have an affinity with the words Jesus Christ and that story.
Yes.
But I'd be very much like, if I'm going into a space, I remember a wonderful priest who was a very wonderful guy in North Kerry called Pat Moore, who was friends with John Moriarty, philosopher, and also John O'Donoghue, a writer as well, who was an amazing writer. And this guy was integral for a summer that I met him, because I was involved in a lot of films, and he got in touch and we were meeting up, and he was friends with Ger Barrett. Anyway, he taught me something. He brought me to a place where it's down in Kerry, a sacred place as well. And he said, when you're walking in here, you're walking into a sacred space. Just take a moment as you're walking in. So I did that with the Hill of Tara, but right beforehand, Michael, let's just call him Michael said, oh, you want to touch the shield in the gig? And I was like, what's that? And he goes, look at that thing there. It's like a stone. Yeah. And there's like this kind of female form that was etched into the stone. And it's like maybe, I think could potentially be 1,500 years old. Wow. Sorry, am I going away from the mic?
No, you're good.
These shieling the gigs were all over Ireland, but they were actually a Celtic phenomenon. And they were over in Wales and in Britain and places. And apparently they were fertility goddesses. So if someone was struggling to have a child or something like that, they could go touch the shieling the gig and say a few prayers, and then they would have a child potentially. Yeah. If a man touches it, he becomes very lustful, basically. And you can be overtaken by the shieling the gig. He said, go on, give it a lash there to touch it.
I really want to chime in and say a sexual joke now, but I'll shut up. Carry on.
Go on, you could, sure, go ahead. Go ahead, I'll drink a glass of water here while you're saying it.
You just touch the shield in the gig and then you get a hard on her.
Well, let's just say I was feeling a bit peckish over the next week or two.
Yes, I love that.
But so I think for me, it's
I went on Tinder more than I usually do.
When Tinder was good. When the algorithm wasn't presenting a load of bots and weirdos, there was actual people on there with morals.
No swingers.
Yeah. They were genuine people. So no, he was like, go on, give it, go on, touch it, and I did. I touched it. So this was all a part of it. So I would recommend, if anybody's going there, touch the sheen in the gig before you go in. So this is right at the gateway into the Hill of Tara. So then, going into the Hill of Tara, and I'm just like, okay, I'm touching the sheet in the gig now. It's time to
stingle.
I said, okay, just be careful now, Bertie. There's no women around.
I can't hold Mike's hand.
There's a hot one over there. No.
Ooh, Michael looks lovely all of a sudden.
So anyway, and by the way, the Shield in the Gig has, if you look into the Shield in the Gig, do your Googling now, people, because you will see there's a certain kind of, how would I say, there's a certain consistency to the actual design of the Shield in the Gig. And I'll say no more than that. Walking into the Hill of Tara, I took the moment and I said, okay, we're walking to the Hill of Tara. And then I went in, and on the right-hand side, I believe, was where the British Israelites, I was literally condemned by user 275897 on TikTok. And they said, I remember the number as well. That's not a random number, but anyway, they basically said, don't dare, because I said Israelites in the video when I was making this, and they were like, it was British Israelites.
How dare you?
Not Israelites. And I was like, okay, so it was British Israelites that came about 100 years ago, went searching for the Ark of the Covenant in the Hill of Tara. They believed that it was there. Now, who knows? Is it the Ark? Sorry. Not the Ark of the Covenant. I messed this up before. The Holy Grail. The Holy Grail. Big difference.
The Holy Grail is a thing.
The Holy Grail. Yeah, they're looking for the Holy Grail. The cup that Jesus would have used at the Last Supper. The Ark of the Covenant is
over in the Hill of Tara in Ireland.
These folk thought it was there, and they basically started ruining the site. So you can just see all these mad little holes in this mound.
Okay.
And there's pictures, you can just Google it and you'll see these British Israelites doing it, right?
No way.
Mad stuff. So I was coming in, so I was greeted with that. And then I was in a state of shock because he was presenting the different places, the mounds. This is 4,000 years old. This is this, and this is where the Lia Fal, the stone. Sorry, my hand's going to the Lia Fal, the stone of destiny, is over here. This is Cormac's house here, the hill of. And next thing, there's all these Irish families, look like Irish families, just running around like it's a town park.
You saw that?
They were there. And I was just shocked. I was like, what? There was one guy, little kid on top of the hill of the hill of the hostages, I think it is, kicking the ball off it. I was just like, what the hell is that father or mother doing to that child?
Okay, wait, this is not in the fucking spirit world. This is like...
This is real life.
Real life.
Real life.
Just
real life. And they're just running around. One guy striding around with the dog, like out for the daily stroll. And I'm just like, okay, but this is the hill of Tara, people. So just, and then I
the
was
moment that you tell them that there could have been a Jesus cop over there, they will immediately like buzz off.
I don't think these people gave a shit.
Really? A Jesus cop?
Well, like, I mean,
maybe
like any Irish.
No, I'm saying like the council or whatever. Like,
yeah. Well, no, the OPW was bringing me on this tour, and I said it to Michael, right? I said, Michael, what's going on here? He goes, technically, this is a public place. There's nothing we can do. But he understood my frustration.
Yeah.
And like, you know, farmers and stuff can use it for sheep or whatever. But like my point is that I was deeply, because was having a spiritual experience, and then I was going up to the Lia Fal, the stone of destiny, where whoever touches it, if it roars, that means you're basically the king. It didn't roar when I touched it. I was very disappointed. But it hasn't roared in about 1,000 years, 2,000 years or so. Okay. But like the point is, like I was there, and Michael is such an amazing guy. I hope that's his name. OPW, big up to the OPW, and but I was deeply disturbed by the place then, because I was just like having this experience, as walking around, and I was feeling the sacredness and the kind of, but I felt this energy of like just kind of grating, kind of peculiar energy, and I'm just thinking, is the Sheila and the gig that's giving me this, like? Or is it the fact that people are just completely disrespecting the place?
Is it the anger that I'm actually experiencing in this real life, or is it a natural like discomfort? Tingling. That's
I believe it was a spiritual kind of experience, because I believe there's a lot of confusion and just sadness and hurt, and because it's not being treated right. I think people don't understand that, and also you have the M3 motorway that the government of Ireland sanctioned to go literally through the arteries of it. So they basically just went through a load of archaeological sites and just destroyed parts of the artery of the Hill of Tara.
It's so tough, right? Like, and I'm not defending the decision whatsoever, especially if there was another route.
There was another route.
There you go. Then that's fucking buffoonery again.
Yeah.
But it's also so interesting when people like think about like history and all that. It's like there's so much going on, right? So much happened. How do we navigate this space? Like, is this, are we going to keep this? Are we going to like ruin this? Like, God knows. Like, I have been going out on a jog over on the Battle of Clontarf and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I've read the
Lovely.
thing.
Yeah.
So I've done it all the way out to Bull Island. Like, I know it. But interestingly enough, I walked to Croke Park last week, and I was like, oh, there's more signs here, you know, and I'm just learning as I go. Like, that's so fucking cool, where I'm in a big city, but history is presenting itself to me rather than me like chasing it.
The one thing I will say about the Hill of Tara, right? I understand that, you know, we're all living on settlements.
We're all
people,
living on in
but
history.
But this place, thousands of years of...
Where is it, by the way?
Hill of Tara. So it's County Meath. So it's up... it's not too far from here.
No, it's not.
Yeah, not too far. It's just the one place in Ireland where like it would just be the most sacred part. And I think the government of Ireland is kind of like... they just... There's just such an economic, you know... how would I say, preposition? Like they just don't think like that. But then also as well, when I met those families in there, a lot of Irish people don't appreciate it, like, you know. So maybe there's that element as well, and that's why I feel like I'm on this mission, or this journey, is that it's not about changing other people, but it's trying to shed a new light onto this stuff to make it And I kind of coined this. I said I coined it, but I didn't leave it up there. I said making history cool again, you know, or making history great again, Irish history great again, because it's like, you know, it's important to understand where we're coming from. It's important to understand our roots and our ancestry and what has gone on before. It's not always exciting and it's not always of interest to everybody, but if you have some general understanding of it, it can actually help you in present day.
It will help you in present day. Confidence in your ancestry, your bloodline, and who you are and stuff. But I feel like everyone that I've come across that is genuinely curious and interested and is out learning about their history, slowly starts to learn more about their culture and slowly starts to learn what? The Irish language.
Yes.
And that's super important.
Yes.
And this is coming from someone that, like, I don't think I'll ever get close to learning Irish, you know, just because I'm just bad at languages in general. But learning your language is so fucking important, guys.
Absolutely.
And I think that spark, that flame of getting curious about your history is one step closer to getting fluent in the Irish language.
Yes.
Which
You're
I
right.
think would be fucking lovely to see. I hope it happens. I don't know if it will.
Yeah.
But
I'll give you know, kudos to the government for keep trying. They're at least attempting to keep it alive.
They're trying their hardest. They are. Like everything for now anyways, whenever I've come across a big event or something like that, it was Irish first, English second. Like you greet people in Irish, which I think is fucking lovely. On the bus, wherever it may be.
Yeah, I'm always reading on the Lewis. I'm reading the things. I just love because I'm no good at speaking it, but I can read it and I can understand it and stuff like that. But like, I'm not very good at speaking it. But I do have my Duolingo, and I am always just touching base with words and things like that. It's a beautiful language. Yeah. It really is.
Oh, it's poetry.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah,
genuinely is. Whenever I come across, especially Irish names.
Yeah.
Irish names are fucking poetry.
Hartalán ó Brosnaán is Anamdum is my name.
Really? And what does that translate to?
Bertie Brosnan.
No.
Bertie Brosnan is my name.
The meaning, I mean.
Bertie Brosnan is my name.
Okay.
You said Irish names.
Yeah.
I just said my name.
Oh, but I thought that a lot of people had like explanations to their name. So like what the name means.
Okay, so
like Debbie means Debbie.
The Hartalán one, I don't know, but I know the O'Brosnaán is to do with the clan, and they were originally butchers from the River Brosna region in North Kerry.
Oh,
yeah.
No way.
Yeah,
and you're from Kerry, right?
Yeah. Brosnaán, Brosna originated in Kerry.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that for you. Last question, and then we're gonna end it.
Yes.
You have the option, you have the opportunity to have a few people at the table from Irish history. You want to sit down with them? Who the fuck are you choosing?
How many? Three, okay.
Like your blunt rotation of Irish history.
Obviously, Brian Ború.
Yeah.
Michael Collins. And to be honest with you, I'd love to meet Gormla.
Okay. Really? What are you going to fucking ask Gormla?
I think I might touch the shield in the gig and head off for a weekend with her.
I fucking love that. That's the way you fucking end it. Yeah, fucking betrayer. What's it called? Traitor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it.
It's been fantastic.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Fuck the snakes. You know, I learned something new today. Thank you so much for listening / watching. Bye.
Great stuff, Debbie.
Whoop.
That was great.
Happy?
Fantastic. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Bertie Brosnan. What a fucking lad. It was super good. Let me know what you think. And if you're celebrating St. Patrick's Day, I really hope you have a good one. If you're drinking, be safe and don't get involved into any trouble, alright? Ciao. Enjoy yourself. Bye.